Yo, it's crazy. I actually woke up today and I wanted to make a video about the U.S. men's national team. I never thought I'd say those words.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not the type of brother to play with. See a lot of people acting like oh yeah. All ball players sounding like haters. We the young kings of this generation, oh yeah.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back. Pitchside with Parker. Kind of an international break special, if you will. And today we're talking about the new look U.S. men's national team. In this video, I'm going to go over the two friendlies that the U.S. national team played in this international break, featuring almost exclusively European-based players for the first time ever, really, in a U.S. national team. And then I'm also going to look at what might be the best lineup for the U.S. going forward into the World Cup qualifiers, into the Gold Cup, and all the crazy amount of international fixtures that is coming up in the next year. But before we get into all that, I just want to, take a moment, get a few things out of the way at the beginning of the video, as always. First of all, if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My goal is still 250 subscribers by the end of the year. I know it's a lofty goal, but we're over halfway there. So if every single one of y'all just suggested it to one person, we can make it happen. So do that. Like the video as well. That really helps these videos get seen by more people. And your question of the day is, who would be your number 9 for the USA? We'll get into the lineups later, but I want you to answer that one big hole on the men's national team. Who would be your striker going forward? So let me know that in the comments and we can get into the video. So as I said at the beginning, I mean, this is not a video I ever really expected to make. Like, you are talking to somebody who really is not a huge fan of the U.S. men's national team. I would always get into it during the World Cups, but I was never really somebody who followed the team in and out through friendlies, through all the different camps throughout the year. I think a lot of that was that I never really watched that much MLS, and for a long time the U.S. team was comprised of players from the MLS, players in Liga MX, another league I never really have watched very much. So it's a very different but a very exciting experience now that we're seeing a U.S. team filled with players from, clubs that I'm watching every week, players that I see play in Europe. And I mean, even this time around, who knows how much longer it'll last, but Yunus Musah came through and he's an Arsenal product. Like, that was a really special feeling for me to feel like I could watch an Arsenal player in a USA jersey. It was incredible. Yes, Arsenal let him go, I know, but we're going to claim him for now. But yeah, like, this is a team that really gets me excited to watch the games. I've never experienced, outside of the World Cup, anticipating a U.S. men's national team game. Looking forward to it, and looking forward to it for more than just what the game is, because that would be the excitement during the World Cup. You're in a tournament, you could win something. I was sitting here counting down the minutes until I could watch an international friendly against Wales and against Panama, which are not particularly exciting fixtures, just because I knew that the players that were on the field and the way they were going to play was going to be exciting. And it's yet to be seen how many of these European-based players will be on the final squad that makes it to some of those international tournaments next year, and what that mix between some of these younger players and some of the more old guard players will be. But assuming that a lot of these players, especially like Tyler Adams, Weston McKinnie, Gio Reyna, assuming that these are kind of the core that we're going to be going with going forward and the base of the team, it just leads to some excitement. I'm excited. I'm proud to watch the U.S. national team for the first time that I genuinely can remember. And I know that might make some people mad who watch this, people who have been historically more into the national team. Good for you. I'm glad you could find some joy in it. But to me, it was just never something that I was all that interested in. I just gotta be honest about that. Like, I bandwagoned over to Sweden, and I had no shame in that whatsoever. But we're back, baby. We're all in on the USA now, so I'm loving it. And the two games that they played this international break were kind of like polar opposites in a sense. The first one against Wales, USA looked very dominant, but they didn't manage to score any goals, and it finished 0-0. They had all of the ball, they had possession, they were in some dangerous areas, they had a couple of chances, but the lack of a striker was very apparent in that game. They went with Leggett as kind of a false nine, and there was a lot of interchange in the front three, but none of them were really playing striker. And then in the second game against Panama, it was much different. They actually did opt to go with the striker. They started Nicolas Gioachinni, somebody I had never heard of before that game, but he scored twice. Then he did miss a penalty, and then Sebastian Soto came on, who's another real number 9 striker. He also scored 2 goals. And so that game, US did not quite look as dominant or not quite as polished as they did against Wales, but they did find the goals. So that was a little bit different. And I think the game against Panama, in my estimation, is more so what we're going to see from this team going forward, especially when they're playing against other CONCACAF sides. I think the USA will really be able to score goals, play open games, and the reality is that there are some questions at the back, so they may concede a few as well. But I think these games just showcased exactly what this team can be and exactly what the young core can bring to it. I think the most exciting thing that we saw throughout those 2 games in terms of the players was the midfield trio. Both games, the starting lineup had Tyler Adams, Weston McKinnie, and Yunus Musah as the midfield 3. Adams and McKinnie have been in the team for a little while now, but their roles are a little bit more defined, with Adams finally being realized as the defensive midfielder that he is instead of being played at right back, and McKinnie being given a little bit more freedom going forward. I thought it was really great seeing him express himself and just having more free reign to kind of run around and do whatever he wanted in these games. It was exciting to watch, and he was huge against Panama. He was almost playing on the wing doing stepovers against Wales as well. It was very exciting to see, and a nice contrast from what we tend to see from him at club level, where he's used more as a presser and a defensive player in a lot of ways, and when he is on offense, it's more like, okay, we're going to pass it to you, but move the ball on as quick as you can. And then Musah, we still don't know if he will play for the U.S. national team, but Gregg Berhalter, please, for the love of God, do what you got to do. I don't care what you have to offer him under the table. I don't care where you have to take him, how you have to try to bribe this guy. Make it happen, because we need Yunus Musah in this team. He is a very progressive midfielder. He's an incredible dribbler. He's great on the ball, and he's only 17 years old. And he could be the future for the U.S. national team just as much as Gio Reyna or Tyler Adams or any of these other younger players that we're talking about. So I really love the midfield. And although they were great, my favorite player to watch out of anybody in the first 2 games was Sergino Dest. This guy is just different gravy. He is a completely different style of player than we've ever really seen on the national team level. He's just a street baller. He's a futsal kid. If you've ever played competitive futsal, or if you've played small-sided with really good players, you've seen guys like Sergino Dest. I have before, and you could just see it immediately, the way that he plays. It's the close control, it's the willingness to take a man on, the comfort in tight spaces. It's almost a shame to see him at right back, honestly, because I would love to see him as a winger or in a place where he could be positioned constantly further up the field. But he's just an incredible technician. He's so fun to watch, and I feel like he's just such a threat to every defender. He gives you that extra element that an opponent has to think about in your team, and that dynamism is something that the U.S. has really missed over the years. And as he plays in Barcelona, he's only going to keep getting better, which is the truth for a lot of these young players as well. And again, that's what is so captivating about it. There were definitely some newer players that stood out as well in terms of players that hadn't really made appearances before or weren't as big of names. I mentioned Gioachinni before, the striker. I thought he played pretty well. I mean, he did about as much as you could ask for him in his first start, scoring twice, obviously, against Panama. The one thing that did concern me was the penalty kick miss that he had. I would like my striker to be more certain, tucking a chance like that away, and so that did give me a little bit of pause on him. I really liked Sebastian Soto. I think, for me, he impressed a little bit more than Gioachinni. I could definitely see him getting some minutes for the U.S. in a striker spot that is very much up in the air. And then another player I wanted to shout out briefly was Richie Ledesma. He came on in the Panama game and actually assisted both of Soto's goals, both coming towards the end of the game. And he's a holding mid player for PSV. He looks like a really, really talented player. And the midfield is going to be where there's a lot more competition. So I don't know how much minutes he'll really be able to get over the coming year or so, but he is a great option to have in there as well. Anyway, let's move on and talk about what is the U.S. national team's best 11 players moving forward, moving into the future, based on what we've seen in these 2 games and analyzing what some of the question mark areas still are. So I threw out this lineup on Twitter. As I've said many times before, be sure to follow me on Twitter if you don't already, if you're a YouTube regular, but maybe you haven't seen me on other places. It's really the only social media I use, but you can get involved in the videos. And a lot of people did with this tweet. I'm not totally sold on this, but it was just kind of a starting place to start from so we could have a little conversation about it. I think for me, the huge question areas are striker, as I mentioned before. And again, put your responses to who would be your number 9 in the comments. And then the other 2 areas of concern are outside back and the second center back. I think John Anthony Brooks is far and away the best center back that the U.S. has, but I think depending on who you ask, that second center back spot is definitely more up for grabs. Alex Campbell, he responded to the tweet. He said he would put Aaron Long in there. I think that's a great shout as well. He definitely has more experience than Chris Richards, who I decided to put in there. He was a player that made an appearance against Panama towards the end of the game, but as Alex noted, he doesn't have a lot of international experience. He doesn't have a lot of experience at his club with Bayern either. So although there's clearly some talent there, he's opting for the experience of Aaron Long, and I could definitely see that being a way that the U.S. goes. Those guys don't inspire a lot of confidence in me, but I don't know that any of the second center back choices will. Another debate that I saw a lot was, do you play Reggie Cannon? Do you play Anthony Robinson? Who is that fullback pairing with Sergino Dest? Because Dest can play on either side, really. So it kind of just comes down to who do you prefer out of those 2 at least. And then you could throw in DeAndre Yedlin into that conversation as well, who can also play right back. Again, much like center back, none of these players are phenomenal. None really stands out above the others. Obviously, with Yedlin, you have somebody who's got some Premier League experience. He's got that elite pace that we all know about. But outside of that, how much can he add? I find Anthony Robinson to be a very similar player. He's super quick. He makes pretty good runs up the field, but he's not great on the ball, and the way that the U.S. has been looking to play, that does seem like a concern. I thought he was probably the worst player against Wales between him and Conrad, so he didn't inspire a lot of confidence recently, which is why I put Cannon in there, because he had a good game against Panama. But it seems like the consensus from your responses on Twitter is that Anthony Robinson should be in there playing left back, moving Sergino Dest to right back. I know Karan said that, Gabe said that. So thanks for the responses, guys. You're probably right on that. I mean, I just threw this in because the last game Reggie Cannon played and Dest was at left back. But I do like that lineup a little bit better just because I like having your best players at their best positions. So I think Robinson and Dest as left and right back is pretty good. And then that brings us to the massive question, the one that everybody wonders about, the one that, to me, really is going to determine a lot of the future of how this U.S. team ends up succeeding or not succeeding at the international stage, which is striker. Look, you have to have a great goal scorer in your team in order to win anything. That is just a fact of soccer, and there are very, very few exceptions throughout history. While I would love to compare this to 2010 Spain, that would be getting very far carried away with the U.S. national team right now, and the reality is that you do need a striker. You need somebody to put the ball in the net, and that was apparent against Wales. A lot of people think Josh Sargent is the answer. People on Twitter seem to disagree with that. Alex Campbell especially mentioning that he was not very sold on Josh Sargent. We got some shouts of Jozy Altidore. He was another player I considered as I was making this lineup. I like the experience of Altidore, but one thing that concerns me about Altidore is I'm not sure that he has the same capabilities to be able to play in and around the edge of the box, play this slick football that the rest of the attackers seem to really like. The likes of Reyna, Pulisic, Weston McKinnie, Musah, the way that these guys move the ball, the interchange that they've had in these international games has been really special. And to me, it's going to take somebody that's a little more on the same wavelength as them, somebody a little younger, somebody a little more mobile than Altidore to kind of help facilitate that. I mean, think about, for instance, the way that Giroud plays with France. I know that that's kind of an extreme example, but France won a World Cup basically using Giroud as a wall. He didn't score any goals. He was simply up there to combine the play, hold up the ball a little bit, That is one thing that Jozy can do. But Giroud is really great passer, so I think maybe somebody in that mold could be useful for the U.S. I don't know that Sargent is really that player either. Again, I did like what I saw from Soto, so I think I would put him in that conversation as well, but I'm really not sold on any of the strikers in the U.S. national pool at this point. And the last thing I would add to this lineup is that obviously Musah may not end up picking the USA, but if he doesn't, I would say maybe slot Gio Reyna into attacking mid and play him through the center, and then you could put somebody else at right wing, whether it be Yunus or Conrad or, you know, any number of players really. The U.S. has a lot of wide players. But as I said before, I really hope they sign Musah because he was dynamic in the 2 friendlies. But yeah, I think we've gone on for long enough. The conversation can certainly continue in the comments. Let me know who your striker would be for the U.S. national team. Let me know your starting 11 if you were Gregg Berhalter. How excited are you for this team? What do you think the ceiling is? Because for me, I am very excited. And although the holes that are left in the roster do make me concerned about how the U.S. might perform in the big stage, I do think that this roster should be good enough to win a Gold Cup, to qualify for the World Cup at the very minimum. And regardless of the outcomes, it's going to be a fun team to watch. And more than anything, that is what I'm excited about with this team. And that's why I wanted to make this video. So shout out to everybody who was watching. If you're staying to this point, you are a real one. You already know that. But thank you so much for the support. Again, be sure to like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, and turn on those post notification bells so you know every time I post a new video. Anyway, that's all for this one. I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.